would not be a sinner. I tell you the reason why. God's gonna trouble the water. God's gonna trouble the water.
My father, he was a slave, born in a slave day. He was sold and he was taken away from his mother when he was 4 years old. After he grew up, he wouldn't stand for no whooping. So the owner said, we must get rid of this nigger because he'll ruin all the rest of them. Put him up on the auction block, and the highest bidder would get them. 2 men would take this can from the kitchen out to where the slave was and pour it in a trough. They ate with their hands like this. And when someone would get unruly, they'd tie him between 2 stakes so he couldn't fight back. And they'd whoop him till they got satisfied. Picking cotton. Cotton would grow tall as a man. It almost looked like a snowbank. They'd stay there till the sun go down, and they all go to the log cabin. And up above the log cabin is the house where the old master lived. After the emancipation, they had heard that Uncle Sam was going to give the slaves a mule and $50 and 40 acres of land. Some of the slave owners offered to keep their slaves and take care of them. He asked them to stay on with him, and he'd give him a home and take care of them as long as he lived. But he said he just didn't feel like he was free unless he'd leave. He's young, just traveling around like a young man will. I was born March 5th, 1892. On Lee Prather's farm in a log cabin. I loved the woods, always did. It seemed like it's something out in the woods I enjoyed better than mostly anything. I liked to catch snakes and frogs and lizards and streak fields, play with them. But I didn't kill none of them. I just played with them until I got tired, go find something else. So one day I caught a cottonmouth, and my dad happened to see me with this snake. He was afraid of a snake. That old man ate me up and told me if I ever caught another snake, he'd kill me. And I said to myself, if I knowed my dad was gonna whoop me like that, I'd have held to that snake, because he wouldn't come to me as long as I had that snake. He'd back it up, tell me, put that snake down, boy. I looked at him and found out, put him down. Come here. Oh, my goodness. And that broke up the kitchen with the snakes. Out there on the farm, never dreamed that I'd ever be in a city. I thought home was every place I'd ever be. But I was a black sheep of the family. I left the farm because I didn't like it. It was too long between paydays. I ain't never liked work. I always did like to shirk if I could. I said, well, when I get large enough, I'm gonna leave this farm. Kind of like the prodigal son, I left home and went away, seeking what I heard about the bright lights of the city. I had heard the other boys catching trains, go to different places. I said, well, if they went, I could too. And I went back to the railroad and caught me a train and went to Jackson, Tennessee. And I didn't know where to try to get a room or nothing. I slept in boxcars and anywhere I could get under bridges, on the track. Sometimes I'd go out and just lay my head on a root of a tree. Back in them days, whites in Mississippi was just unbearable. They would just do too much that any man with manhood couldn't take. A colored boy killed a white man one Saturday morning, and there was an angry mob looking for that Negro. And the detective walked up to me and told me to stick him up. I put my hands up. I didn't know what it was all about. I asked him, what's wrong? He's kind of cussed until you find out. Marched me down to the jail and locked me up. Finally, they sent for a man to come to identify me. And he come back there and said, come on up here, nigga, let this man look at you. I went to the window. He looked around at the fellows. Said he sure looked like him. He could pass for his twin brother, but he's not the one. I said, mister, what is it? And this old man, he said, nigga, now you get out of town, because if this angry mob see you, and you look so much like the damn nigga that they're looking for, they'll mob you before you be identified. And at that time, I knew what the life of a colored man in Mississippi was. I didn't try to linger around there. It was no more to kill a Negro and killing a rabbit, because there wouldn't be nothing done about it if he did something against a white man. So I knew the best thing for me to do is take it on away from that and go home where I was known. I said, my mother's prayers and my prayers had caused that little detective to lock me up to save me from that angry murder mob. A true-to-life story that happened to me over 54 years ago. This is seasoned poplar. You don't see much wood like this nowhere anymore. And it's strange how that I can have the same size of wood and same type of wood, but only sometimes the picture that I want to make, I can't see it in only one piece. But it seems as though I can see the picture that I want in this piece. It's depicting a tree, and it's an acorn tree. I heard a man tell a story about a hog. He was talking about how a hog would eat the acorn that fell from the tree, but he never looked up and see from whence it came. So I thought it was a nice subject, and it's formed in my mind like this. And I got this piece of wood. It's very hard. I hated to find a hard piece of wood to see this picture in. But this is the piece of wood that I saw it in, and it's up to me to dig it out. I just like barbering. I was hanging around a barber shop, and one barber said, what are you trying to do, steal a trade? I laughed. I said, yeah, I like it. I hadn't learned to barber. Only cut my brother's hair and father and some of the little boys around there. I'd whack it off. It looked like half sheared a sheep or something or other. Sometimes the head looked like rolls around a mountain. But they liked it. I just kept on cutting until I got where I thought I could do a pretty decent job. Some of them fellas come in there, they look so inhuman. I said, I know I got to make this man look better, and he did. I made an independent living out of it. I always had some money in my pocket. When I left home, if I didn't get a job one place, I could get one another, because I was a good barber, and that is better than being on the farm. When I got tired of fishing, I'd go out there and take my knife and carve a picture on one of those trees, 8 or 9 years old. And I'd I praise a knife was the best present anybody could give me. And after I stayed in the barber business for a while, I got to carving again. Every chance I got when I wasn't cutting hair, I'd cut on some wood. I was working on this stick 6 years or more. And you'll find little of everything on it to look at it close. It's a hard piece of work. It's a Q stick. You represent every state except Hawaii and Alaska. As the customers come in the shop, I'd ask him his trade or his sport or his hobby or where he lived. And if he's from Massachusetts, Ohio, or anywhere, I said, what's your trade? And he'd tell me and I'd put it on the stick. And as you look at the stick, the more you look, the more you see. One day at home, I saw this little piece of 2x4, and I picked it up and began to carve on it. It come out to be a little elephant. And I sandpapered it and showed it to my wife, and she looked at it and said, oh, that is cute. And tied a little ribbon around its head and sit it up on the mantle. I said, if you like that ugly thing that well, I'll carve you a zoo. And I began carving every animal that I'd ever saw in the circuses and in the parades and street carnivals, and cows and horses and dogs and squirrels and any kind of animal that I could think of. Sometimes I'd see some animal in a paper or in a magazine, I'd carve it. Being in the shop, men would come in and tell me, you can't carve a lion or you can't carve a tiger, and different things. I'd carve it. And sometimes when the fellows didn't like what I had, so you have to carve that again, that ain't right. Sometimes I'll carve something just to pass time or satisfy my mind, the animals and other things, but it's a story. That's a turtle or that's a lion. Even in the first chapter of Genesis, that everything God made was good and very good. And I did have in mind, if I didn't sell these little animals and different birds and things and snakes that I carved, someday, if it is pleasing to God, I would make an ark.
I trust in God. Wherever I may be, upon the land or on the rolling sea, or come what may, from day to day, my heavenly Father watches over.
The first religious picture I carved was the angel of vengeance. From then on, anything I could picture in my mind, or a story somebody would tell, I'd hear a preacher preach a sermon, and if I could picture that sermon in my mind, I'd carve it.
On the mountain blaze, or on the rolling sea, oh, billow roll, he keeps my soul.
Old Jonah, he was a disobedient type of a fellow. He didn't want to take orders from God. He told Jonah, I want you to go down in Nineveh and preach to those wicked people. Nineveh was a bad place, and Jonah didn't want to go down there among all those bad people. So he decided within himself he wouldn't go. And he got in the ship going down to Tarshish. He got out on the high sea, the wind began to blow and on the easy thought about to be shipwrecked. So they found old Jonah down there hidden. And they said, if you throw me over, the sea will become calm. So they tossed him over. But God had prepared a fish. Some people said it was a whale, but I don't know what it was. But the Bible said God prepared a fish, and it swallowed old Jonah up, and it stayed in the bottom, in his stomach, 3 days. And when he got out of that fish's mouth on dry land again, it was 3 days' journey to go down to Nineveh. But old Jonah made it in one.
He makes the rose the object of his care. He guides thee go through the pathless air, and through the gloom he leads me home. My heavenly Father watches over me. I trust in God. I know He cares for me. On the mountain bleak, or on the rolling sea. Though billows roll, He keeps my soul.
The Book of Wood, some of the work that we did in 1934, the life of Jesus Christ while he was here on earth, 33 years, 33 pictures. I wanted to make the Lord's Supper. I have some more wood, but this is the only piece I could see this picture in. My wife's board where she made biscuits. So finally she let me have it. And I started carving it on it. I was glad she consented to let me have it because I didn't hardly think she would. She had it a long time. I made a mini biscuit off this board. So she let me carve on it. And as I carved and it was revealed and it came out so beautiful, she was well satisfied. My father, he said, you can't do good farming with dull tools. In fact, you can't do nothing much with dull tools. To give a man a nice, decent, smooth shave without burning his face and making it turn red, I learned to sharpen my razors as sharp as they could be. In all of my years of doing barber business, I met one man that I couldn't shave. His beard was as stiff as on a mule's tail. The razor would cut the hair. Click! You could hear him just cutting it. I told the man I can't shave him. He said, go ahead, you're doing fine. He said, every time I shave, I bleed like a hog. It's one of them silent razors, honey. It was like some of these old barbers that don't know how to sharpen the razor. You hear it clean out in the street. Scritch, scritch, scritch. When this hair see this razor coming, it just vanishes. I can't use a dull razor, and I don't do good wet carving with a dull knife. I think that if a picture don't tell a story, it just don't seem much to me. Of course, I like to look at beautiful pictures, but if it don't tell something, a lot of little children can look at some of my work and see what it's trying to tell. They see it and they know it's telling a story. And it's like the one over there where it says you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. It tells a story. A lot of times I hear conversations just like one deacon telling this story. So the devil decided to go fishing one day, and to catch good fish you'll have to have good bait. So he decided, said, I don't want to go fishing unless I can catch something, and he hardly ever do. If he go out to catch something, he usually catches what he go for. So he baited his hook with money, cards and dice, wine, drinks, and a woman. And he knowed he'd catch somebody. He'd catch some of all of us. You've heard people say, I don't do this, I don't do that, in the daytime. But let the sun go down and get behind closed doors, and they'll do mostly anything. Solid the camel at night, string out a net in the daytime. 3 ways to get a message: telephone, telegram, and the third, the best, is to tell a woman. He buried the hatchet, but he left the handle sticking up. So in case you cross me again, I'm going to grab that hatchet and do away with you. We used to read the Bible after I did my evening chores. And one evening I reached over my Bible to thumb through the Sears Roebuck catalog. And the Lord laid his hand on my head. And I fell out of the chair on the floor. And I just went on away like the sun going behind a cloud. I heard the voice said, I told you to read the Bible and you disobeyed, and I am just showing you my power. And some of the old timers came on and examined me. I didn't have no heartbeat or nothing, and they pronounced me dead. While they were there talking, I came back like I went away. I said, hush, mother, I know what's the matter. It is bad to disobey God, because we are powerless creatures. He can just touch you and you can lay down and die, and he can touch you and you'll live again. I said, Lazarus was dead and laid in the grave. He has the same power now that he had then. He can speak and man will live, and he can speak and man lay down and die. I like that. God talks with me in a natural voice, the way I can hear it and understand it. And he know my name. He called me by my name, Elijah. He said, Elijah, your life is a book, and every day is a page. He said, you write a page in life's book every day, and said someday that book will be open and read before your eyes, and you can't deny it because you wrote it yourself. Now this is spoken to me, just like you and I are talking. I laid there and listened attentively. He said, every deed, good or bad, there's a recording angel in heaven, writes it down on the book of life. And he said, when you go up before the bar of God, that book will be open and read before your own eyes, and you can't deny it because you wrote it yourself. I was seeking my soul's salvation, and he spoke to me and he said, Elijah, I'm going to show you how a sinner died. It was the most miserable feeling that I'd ever had. I was squirming, and it's almost like a worm in a hot fire. And then he said, I'm going to show you now how a Christian died. Looked like I was just laid out, just laying there, sleeping away, looking at the most beautiful place I ever saw in my life. And I couldn't hold my peace. I had to let it out. Praise his holy name. After running from the ministry for 20 years, every sermon I refused to preach, he made me carve it. As my wife told me, God made you preach every sermon in wood.
Must I be carried to the sky on flowery beds of ease, or by the others fight to win the prize and sail through bloody seas?
Don't you let nobody